H 4687, an act relative to property tax classifications in the city of Watertown. We're joined by two wonderful colleagues, Representatives Lon and Owens, as well as Watertown City Council President Mark Sideris and George Proakis, the Watertown City Manager, and Earl Smith, Watertown City Assessor. Please welcome.
H 4678. This is a bill that is a continuation of a bill that was passed by the House and Senate in 2023, Chapter 58 of the Acts of 2023. It's necessary really to provide this implementation of a new minimum residential factor for Watertown that would allow us to allocate half of our tax burden to commercial and industrial and personal property and half to residential. The city estimates that if this does not go through, the average residential tax bill will increase by 18.4%. This was stepped down from what we've been allowed to do to if that doesn't continue. That's about $1,300 per resident. I'm here with a panel including the Watertown City Council President, City Manager, City Assessor, and I am going to pass this on to my colleague from West Watertown, John Long.
Thank you, Rep. Owens, and thank you, Chair Eldridge and Chair Madaro, and the committee for allowing us to present the unique circumstances of why we are here today for the city of Watertown. Having grown up in the town and still living there today, Watertown is a much different place than it was in the early 80s when Proposition 2.5 came into play. At that point, I think you'll hear that at that point, each city and town in Massachusetts was frozen at the rates of what your commercial and residential tax levy could be. Watertown has experienced a great deal of commercial development, a lot by life science businesses. And it's put us in a unique situation. We've had a lot of success. We've been very good financial stewards, building 3 grammar schools without going to the MSBA, doing that all within Proposition 2.5, a fully funded pension system. And currently, we are building a new high school without a tax override. But I think you'll hear, and I'll pass it along, I'm going to be brief, is that we're now a bit of a victim of our own success in terms of being stuck with this formula. So this committee and the legislature passed this, as Rep. Owens mentioned, and it's what we want to do is just continue what we've been doing, because you will hear from our city manager some of the complications that have come up from this old formula that we are kind of stuck with. So again, appreciate the committee, and I'm going to pass it to our city manager, George Proakis.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Eldridge and Madaro and members of the Joint Committee for hearing us today. I'm here speaking in support of House Bill 4687, which would be a permanent continuation of the tax split home rule passed by the General Court in 2024, balancing the tax burden between residential taxpayers and our growing commercial tax base. But I want to provide a little bit of history as to why we got to this point. In 2015, when we identified a growing set of capital needs, the City Council made a decision to seek new growth instead of regular Prop 2.5 debt exclusions and overrides to address our financial priorities. And shortly thereafter, the Council adopted new zoning for greater density in the mixed-use Arsenal Corridor and Pleasant Street Corridor in Watertown. This zoning worked. It created first a substantial amount of new residential growth, and then more recently, a substantial amount of new commercial growth. Over the course of the most recent decade, this new zoning yielded the type of growth that I think many communities would be seeking. But as that happened, our commercial, industrial, and personal property class, the CIP class, increased from 18.87 to 28%, while the residential class percentage of our assessed value went from 81 to just under 72%. Beginning in 2022, we started to hit upon an unintended consequence of this growth. An obscure lever in the tax code from Chapter 200 of the Acts of 1988 of Mass General Law was triggered. This law establishes that the residential class has to pay the lowest percentage share of the tax levy they have paid since classification began in 1982. For Watertown, that's 61% on the residential side. And as commercial growth continued, Watertown, like many communities who have a split tax rate and who shift to the 175% maximum on a split tax rate, suddenly found that we couldn't shift to the 175 on the commercial side anymore. We were limited in starting in 2022 to shifting to 159%, then the following year 150%. And the result of this, and I want to stress this is a substantial challenge when you're trying to share stories of new growth and the value of it to a community. Every time we built more commercial growth, much of the new tax burden would actually fall on our existing residential taxpayers. When classification began in '82, a significant portion of the Arsenal Street corridor was owned by the federal government and not included in our tax base. And today it represents 8% of Watertown's total value of the tax levy. So this factor that was set in 1982 is impacting our growth and our successes today. In 2024, the General Court granted Watertown a reprieve, allowing us to shift to the 175% split used by many other communities, as long as the minimum residential portion remained 50% of the share of the tax levy. This was a 3-year reprieve that is set to expire in fiscal year 2027. We project that Watertown's residential taxpayers will face an 18% hike in 27, as we once again would be limited to being below that 175 shift number that we would otherwise be allowed to do. This legislation will alleviate those concerns by establishing a new minimum residential factor of 50% permanently, as long as Watertown does not exceed that full 175% shift allowed by law. It would not be a new practice. It's an extension of what we've been doing the last 3 years. With this legislation, we do estimate the residential homeowner will see a more modest 4.2% tax increase. We are still seeing commercial values drop a little bit, so the result is that on the commercial side, it won't be a big increase. Essentially, it might even be a decrease. It'll continue to fall the way it will, but it will relieve this 18% increase by flipping back to the old system. So I encourage the committee and the General Court to consider and support this legislation to alleviate the burden on our residents. I'm happy to answer any of your questions. I'd like to ask the Council President to share some thoughts on this, and as I noted before, our City Assessor is here to answer questions that you may have as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Madaro, Chair Eldridge, and the members of the committee for taking the time to listen to us on House Bill 4687. I'm here as the other elected official in the room on behalf of my residential taxpayers who are going to see a significant burden placed upon them because of a situation that happened way back when, and we're just looking to continue a practice that we've been following not only for the 3 years, but for the years since it's been implemented. And state law does allow us to do the 175 shift, and we're here requesting that we get a permanent opportunity to get to that point and stay at that point, because the residential taxpayers of the community, as in every community in this Commonwealth, is facing burdens that we never thought were possible. We have people that have a hard time staying in their homes. They're living on fixed incomes, and we just want any little thing we can do to help them. I feel, on behalf of my colleagues on the City Council, that it's important that we do what we can, and that's why we're here today. We're requesting some relief to continue what we've been doing, which has been past practice, and hope that you will consider us favorably.
Great. Do we have any questions from committee members?
Mr. Chair.
Please.
Thanks everyone for your testimony. My question is, and you might not know, which is also fine, but how much of Watertown's commercial base impacts the residents of other municipalities, right? The businesses in Watertown, are they largely local? Are they, mostly small businesses that are employing people within the city with, and other, supporting the residents of the city? or are people coming in? If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, but I think you have a few larger businesses in Watertown that are more regional in their reach. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the regional impacts of the business community in Watertown generally, and what this particular proposal would mean for the businesses in the city and also within the region that I suspect, I could be wrong, but that's why I'm asking, that Watertown might have within Eastern Massachusetts. Thanks.
I can try. Thank you, Senator, for the question. We certainly have a lot of small businesses in Watertown, a lot of small retail establishments, a lot of small landlords that support those that are renting to those retail establishments, and certainly where the tax split is impacts them. But one way to look at the perspective on this is about 10% of our total tax revenue comes from one company, Alexandria Real Estate, the largest biotech property owner in the world, I believe. And a significant more from Boylston Properties that owns the project at Arsenal Yards. Now, they rent spaces to small biotech companies. They rent spaces to retailers and other entities, but a significant portion of where our tax base comes from is from those individual companies. I do think that it is not unexpected for them to be paying at the 175% split. It's what they sort of understood as they came in and built over the course of the last decade. And obviously, it is a little tough for me to sort of define the impact of Alexandria's bill regionally or beyond. But I will say that, we are very sensitive, and we certainly want to make sure as we grow and as we have these successes that we want the tech businesses and we want our small retailers to all be successful. It's as important to us that they're successful as anything. It is an odd situation that the victim of our success of being able to have significant new tech growth is that we hit up against this residential factor number and have tried to balance it back.
If I may, and maybe Earl, if you wanted to say, we do have several small businesses in Coolidge Square, in Watertown Square, in other areas in the community up on the south side, and they do provide services to the community. There's pizza shops, there's nail salons, there's local banks, and
That Wings place.
they're all great, but we also have, we do have some chains. We do have some of those things, but I think because we've been doing this for so long, this shift has been in place since I've been on the city council in 1995. And these businesses know that, unfortunately, this is part of the cost of doing business. And I think they've factored that into their business models. And I think that, if we continue down this path and put more of the burden on the residents, I'm sure the businesses are going to be really happy about it, because their tax bills are going to go down. But then those residents may not be able to go to those businesses to buy a pizza once a week or go get their nails done once a week. So it's a two-edged sword here, because you're benefiting some of them while you're still hurting some of the people that are, treating our local residents to a good meal or a good, snack or whatever.
At the diner. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I think, as the city manager said, the 10% that is owned by Alexandria, if this doesn't go through, they will see a significant tax decrease that will be absorbed by our residents. So they will be the benefit of this not going through. They will be, a national player will get a significant tax decrease that has to be absorbed by the resident.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. Has that business or any of the other larger businesses in the city indicated that if this goes through, they will leave?
Yeah.
I have not heard that concern. Essentially, there was some concern expressed the first time this passed 3 years ago, because that was the moment where we were really, because the factor had started to slide and they had gotten some tax benefit, the 2 years that the factor slid in 22 and 23, and then this passed in 24, and it shifted back. That was the year that it had the most impact on them, and we didn't see a loss of business at that moment in time. I haven't heard a concern where businesses have expressed a concern of potentially leaving or being unable to operate at this point. The reality is like everyone regionally, our commercial values are declining slightly, particularly the office and lab values are declining slightly. The reason why why even with this passing, the residential increase is 4.2% and not just the 2.5% that you might see on a even keel basis is because there probably still is some commercial tax relief in this, even with it passing, just merely by the reduction in commercial values from fiscal year 26 to fiscal year 27. So being that they're probably seeing a slight reduction versus a substantial reduction, I haven't heard as much of a concern about that happening as if we were doing something that would push a big burden back onto their side. This is a continuation of a sort of steady state that we're currently at.
Great, thank you all very much. Appreciate that.
Just very quickly, so our council president asked me to calculate all the tax bills at the moment. Alexandria is our largest taxpayer. They are a super good corporate neighbor. And last year they paid approximately $19 million. If this expires, they will pay about 15% less. So we're talking like a $3 million, $2.9 million to be absorbed by the residential taxpayers. And I meet with Alexandria every year. We go through everything. They are a super corporate neighbor. And we always have a good working relationship. We've always come to agreements on different things. And for the most part, the business community in Watertown, it's the same with me. We air values up front because if there's problems, we want to know about it. We have 5 appellate tax board cases, and for a city of 10,800 parcels, it's quite amazing. And actually, most of them are personal property by some of the big public utilities. So we don't have a lot of issues with the business community. They always come and see me.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions from committee members, please?
Thank you. Having lived in Watertown in the 2000s, and my husband also worked in the famous Green restaurant, but I just wanted to really highlight how creating opportunity through land use regulation and really thoughtful planning and long-range planning with community support that started decades ago, that really brought Watertown to where you are now to be able to embrace that opportunity for growth when Alexandria and other companies came in, and therefore really able to maintain fiscal stability in Watertown to be able to build new schools and be able to do different things. So I just wanted to highlight how it takes decades to kind of be here and how that pre-planning within the town and with those involved that are many sitting right here, to be ready for those opportunities when they come in the door. I just wanted to highlight that and congratulate you for that. And also just quickly the question that what you're asking for in this bill is that there's kind of this historic put in place when 2.5, that this percentage that has to be on commercial and residential. It's not shifting really the burden. It's just trying to get away from this kind of historic split that is why you needed for the last couple of years, but continue on to just be able to kind of fairly tax at the not increased value, but anyway, if you can just explain that very briefly, that would be appreciated. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the question, Representative, and thank you all. I will share that there has been some interesting conversations amongst those of us at the table and some of our staffs about trying to figure out the history of Chapter 200 of the Acts of 1988, which, from what I can tell, allowed communities to reach the 175% tax split, but then placed these residential minimum factors based upon where communities were and sort of trapped you in a 1982 world. And a community that doesn't aggressively push new growth probably won't run into this problem that we have run into. So we somewhat became the victim of our success with this secondary, sort of more obscure calculation that outside of the folks at the Division of Local Services, I haven't had a lot of conversation and interest in that you know, it's the way it sets it, it's either 50% or it's the highest of where you were in 82. And in our case, because we were such a residential community in 82, we were set at this 61% number. And essentially that's why, you know, we didn't ask to wipe the number out altogether. We asked to go to the 50-50 split, which we thought was reasonable. I'll say this, if we continue commercial growth, we may still slip under the 175% cap again. That's okay. Like going forward, we're also pursuing substantial residential growth in our 3A MBTA community district in Watertown Square. So our hope is we sort of do balanced residential and commercial growth going forward and sort of maintain that 50-50 split and be able to still tax at 175. We think we can do that if we very carefully continue to plan as much as we carefully continued to plan in the past. But we basically need the permanent adjustment from the 61% split to the 50% split to kind of set us at an even place going forward and be able to plan for that as we move forward.
Please.
Okay, so back in 2024, you came to the House and you request this adjustment, right? 50% of the tax levy for residential, 135 split commercial, right? But you got 3 years extension, right? Hey, why you want this permanent now? What's the different now? Like, why you just don't ask for that 3 year extension? What is, can you please explain me the different circumstance right now that for you, instead of asking for an extension, that you ask this to be permanent? Because then if you want to come back, the tip that you're gonna have to come to us. So, okay, there you go.
If I may, Mr. Chair, thank you, Representative. It's a very good question. I think we were well aware in 2024 that there wasn't a path out of this problem. It doesn't exist. I mean, we actually need a permanent adjustment to do this, but it was such a new thing to ask for, and it was such a obscure little piece of law to work with that it seemed more viable to ask for a 3-year time frame, see how it worked, see where we landed, and then come back and readjust in 3 years. You know, could we do this for a 3-year period again? Sure. But my expectation is I would be back here 3 years from now with a potential of a 22% increase in taxes or 25% increase in taxes if it doesn't pass 3 years from now. Because the essential problem that we've created is not going to go away. The problem being that we've been successful at building new commercial growth. So we thought the fair thing to do was to acknowledge that we really need this 50-50 split in order for things to work for Watertown. And certainly if folks see fit that it's appropriate to have us come back here and check in on it, so be it. But I think that the more likely possibility is if we asked for another 3 years, we would be back here in 3 years on an even bigger cliff than the one we're sort of standing on the side of right now.
Yeah, and thank you for that question. I think also we have now 3 years of evidence that this did not impact our commercial growth in any way, this split. We have had, I think in the Boston Business Journal, it said we have the second most, second only to Cambridge, of new lab space coming on, even in this kind of downturn of lab economy. So we have evidence now. We have 3 years where we had this shift, and it has not impacted our commercial growth. It hasn't caused us any problems. So it makes sense now to say, well, this is not something that's going to be a drag on our growth. Commercially, it's not going to be a drag on our growth. Well, it may be a drag on our growth residentially if we don't get it. So we have the evidence now, and we think that this is something that should be taken care of once and for all.
And to Representative Owens' point, we do have evidence now, and we feel that the economic downturn on the business side is is nationwide. It's not just here in Massachusetts and not just specific to Watertown. So what we want to have some, we want to go to the 50% to be able to say that this is how we base all of what we do. When the resident comes and says, why are you raising my taxes 4.2% when it should be just 2.5%? But it's, because of assessed values and things, it changes. So I think this will give us some continuity and not have us back here 3 years from now in a worse situation, as the manager said, than we are going to be in fiscal year 27.
I was just curious because, it is easier to persuade this committee, planning committee, and revenue of increasing percentage will go to commercial property, then come back and then try to switch back. If you see the business landscape or whatever you have change. But you got 2 great reps that we don't like, and we believe you test it, you have evidence, and
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would just like to state that what we're looking to do today is what's currently allowed by state law, and currently many cities and towns are at that 175, the 50%. Some of them don't even meet that, so they don't need to come here and change the formula. We are, as someone said earlier, we're the victim of our own success. And we've been good stewards for the community, and we're here to try to continue to be good stewards for our community, in particular to the residential taxpayer who struggles at times.
Thank you. And it is a good question. And I think that's why, sometimes we, as Rep. Owens says, we do these things to make sure that this is going to work, and it's not permanent, but we know it works, and we know the consequences now if we don't do it. And I think just to talk a little bit about the MBTA Communities Act, Watertown has stepped up to the plate, and I think we are I think we're required by law to do 1,700 units in Watertown Square, and we are at 4,300 units that this city council has approved to build. And so we are going to grow our residential as well, but if this doesn't happen, and our taxes are still not low, because we've got very high assessed values. So our seniors, this is a significant increase. The 18% will be devastating to seniors and on fixed income. And I served in the city council, Council President Sideris, and back when we were trying to redevelop areas of Pleasant Street that you may not know, but at that time, it was a big residential push. We opened it up for commercial and residential. But at that time, housing became, and you can't dictate what the housing is. Certainly there was pushback from a lot of attorneys that there's too much, but at the end of the day, it was real good, smart development that has enabled us to be good stewards and to actually relieve the state of going to the MSBA for hundreds of millions of dollars and doing it ourselves. We have a new high school that's going to be built, that's going to be finished in the next couple of months. It's the first net zero high school in the entire country that will be giving back more energy to the grid than it takes. We've really done an incredible job of stepping up with the MBTA Community Act and more than doubling what we were required to do. And if this doesn't pass, it's going to be really a significant impact on our seniors who have seen all this development, but will be now burdened by it. So again, appreciate all these very good questions. They are legitimate, good questions that should be asked, but we really feel what we have in Watertown is a very unique circumstance that just should be thought of.
I just want to take 2 quick notes. First of all, I appreciate that, as Representative noted, it has a real impact on our residents and impact on our seniors. And I just want to add one more thing about that MBTA Communities rule. We also have 4 projects that have come before the city to be built under the MBTA Communities law since it passed, 2 that have been approved and 2 that are in process. Each of them is talking about the challenges of the cost of building a residential project. I'm actually a little worried that if we start shifting more and more of the tax burden back on the residential side, we're making it harder to build new housing as much as we're also making it harder for the residents that live there. So that is a concern. I also just want to share, Representative, I agree with you completely that we have two great representatives here serving the city of Watertown, and I have really appreciated their guidance and assistance as we've gotten into this very much obscure piece of tax legislation, and the opportunity to work with them to speak before all of you today, and appreciate the opportunity to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of quick questions. What is the balance in the stabilization account?
So in our general stabilization plus our free cash account, our general stabilization account in Watertown usually has about $1.5 million in it. We have certified free cash this year at about $30 million, and we used a portion of that to purchase a site that we are using as a new DPW staging area that we're hoping someday to maybe build senior affordable housing or another project on that site. So we probably have, I don't have the number off the top of my head, probably between 20 and 25 available in between free cash and general stabilization.
What was the greatest source of, that's a very large free cash number.
It is, yes.
Extremely large. So what's the major source of that free cash balance?
Over the course of the last few years, we have found that the interest income on our cash on hand has exceeded the numbers that we have expected it to. We're reluctant to set an interest income number in our budget that is as high as what it has been the last few years, mainly because we find ourselves in a situation where as interest rates are starting to drop, that depending upon that as a revenue source would dry up. So we predict it comes out high, it drops to free cash at the end of the year. That's where more than half, I think, of the free cash of the last 2 years has come from. We essentially also with the number of projects we've been building, we found ourselves where just there's larger funds on our balance sheets, and then we predict interest rates would not go up to 5%. So we're basically, the cash we have on hand makes more money, and we end up with a higher investment income number at the end of the year. That's number one on that list.
And how long has that higher interest income been the driving force of the free cash balance?
This has been the last 3 fiscal years. This has been in this circumstance.
Has there been any thought over the course of those 3 years of using free cash towards reduce the residential, average family residential tax bill, average residential tax bill?
So the reason we haven't is, so to begin with, Watertown, the city council's instruction to me is to maintain stabilization at 8.5% to 15% of our annual budget, which at this point is about $220 million. So that ranges in the 18 to 33 to doing that number quite wrong. 18 to 33 million dollars of maintaining and stabilization to get that 8 to 15 or so percent. Free cash that we have had beyond that, we put into the high school stabilization fund to reduce the borrowing of the high school. We've put it into stabilization fund to pay for the Watertown Square streetscape improvements, which go along with our new Watertown 3A MBTA Communities housing that we're redoing the intersections and work around there. And we've guided them towards reducing the borrowing costs on projects. We're very high on the list of communities in terms of debt service as a percentage of our overall budget. So opportunities I can use to reduce the borrowing and reduce that debt service number has been the first priority of the manager and the council, being the council as we've looked at where to place free cash. And then most recently, like I said, we purchased a site that we had been having an eye on for a while. We're using it for DPW staging right now. We see it as a future site potentially for affordable housing, and we just didn't want to lose the opportunity to do that. So that's where we've been focused.
And your excess levy capacity is fairly minimal?
Pretty much, basically zero, yes.
If I may also add, when we go to our bonding agencies, they point to the stabilization fund as maintaining our AAA bond rating, which gives us a better interest rate when we're borrowing funds. So we on the city council have have instructed the manager that we want to stay in that range for a number of different factors. And we do annually use about $2 million in stabilization to balance the budget, and then if anything is left from the bottom line, we put it back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from committee members? Excellent. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much.